I basically operate under the couple of titles: clinical sexologist, which is kind of an umbrella term. I've been a sex therapist earlier on. I do mostly training and education, and I train other therapists. So clinical sexologist is kind of an umbrella term that incorporates all of those different professional aspects: sex ed, sex therapy. In addition, I am a certified sexuality educator, and I am also certified as a supervisor to help train and get other sexuality educators certified. A college, a couple of medical schools, nursing schools. So, I basically talk wherever people are willing and even not so willing to listen. I can tell you, I've been doing this now for, I think this is my 35th year
Wow.
as a sexuality educator and a clinical sexologist. And, I can tell you every day, I'm still trying to figure this stuff out, still learning, still trying to keep up with things that are changing, trying to nudge along the things that are not changing. I wish I can say I'm very, very pleased with the results of mine and people who do this work, their efforts over the past 30, 35 years, but haven't really pushed the needle all that far.
Mm. What's really interesting about your career, as you've described it, is that it seems to be extremely focused more towards education. I know you said you're also a sex therapist, but it seems like you've really spent a lot of time educating around sexuality. Why do you think that is so important?
Well, because we're just so woefully ignorant. This is an area, right? And there's an old cliche, and it's all fuzzy what we can still refer to, it cannot refer to. But there's a very old cliche that refers to this characterization of the proverbial redheaded stepchild, which basically means it's always there, but it's never acknowledged, it's ignored, right? And always overlooked. So that's sex in not only this, but virtually every other culture. This is something that, because people do, they automatically think they're experts at and experts in. So because it's something that so many people engage in as a behavior, there's an automatic assumption that I don't have to learn about it. I already know what I need to know. I get it up, I put it in, I get it off, I get out. What's there to know? All right. And it's that kind of idea. Now, I will also say that the sort of underlying reason why the education is so necessary, not just because it's useful, but because most people base their sexual knowledge, whatever that may be, off of fear and discomfort and shame. And again, as just somebody who knows what this stuff is, who appreciates this, who is teaching this stuff, I don't want that to be the template that defines sexual experiences for people. And for too many people, that is the template that defines their experiences and sexuality in general. So we need to, I think, it's so much work to just help people see what is the simple, most basic, fundamental, and yes, natural aspect of our humanity.
Yeah, really well said. And I think it's a really important distinction that you made, which is that so many people see their sexualities and are really kind of conditioned into seeing their sexualities through the lens of guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And when you really think about it, it's like dealing with anything from that lens for a prolonged period of time is far from healthy, what we would consider healthy.
Mm-hmm. Or effective.
Or effective, yes. What would the healthy lens be to look at our sexuality through? If we took away guilt and shame, what do you think is the healthy lens?
Well, the easy answer to that is look at everything we do now and just do the opposite. I mean, that's the easy fill. But I mean, it really comes down to things like this is something that should enhance our lives. Pleasure is something we should be looking forward to, not running away from. So if we have part of this lens where we have a healthy relationship with pleasure, right? You know, we have a very rich history, and most Western religion is sort of based on perpetuating this irony that what, first of all, what uh, uh, Catholics in particular will use as the original sin, what most people describe as a creation story going back to, you know, whichever version of Genesis they want to use. But there is this basic script that religion has given people, right? And I'm going to put that in quotes because it really didn't. People kind of did this all on their own. But that religious basis that people hold on to is based on sex and nudity and, you know, all of these more sensuous, erotic aspects of our lives, that they're bad, that they're evil. And you know, I do, you know, I apologize, but I'm going to go to this place, you know, because it's part of the root of all of this. When people look at this Genesis story, and if you ask people, what was it that got Adam and Eve punished and kicked out of the Garden of Eden? Everybody gets it wrong. And I mean pretty much everybody, except maybe a 0.0000000% of people that do kind of get it like I'm telling you. Most people will say that the problem, what got them in trouble, what started everything, and what justifies misogyny and all these negative views toward women is that they disobeyed. That's a Catholic thing, just to be clear. Right? Most other religions don't kind of ascribe to the original sin thing, but everybody who even looks at it that way gets it wrong. Because if we read that original story in any permutation and we follow, right, let our eyes rest on exactly what words they're on when we see God getting angry. It's the greatest irony in the history of civilization. Because while people want to call this disobedience and shame and doing something wrong, the real sin, the real thing that got them in trouble was being uncomfortable with their nakedness. This gift that was bestowed upon them by some higher power that comes along with these erotic feelings and sensations and, you know, all of these things that we can receive from the outside, we can generate from the inside. That's all part of that gift. And the real sin is slapping God in the face when he gave them that gift because they made their discomfort, right? That's sin, selfishness. It wasn't about good or bad. So when we see what started all of this sexual value and ideology that took us in such a wrong direction, this is where it begins, misunderstanding that whole story. Because if we did take this literally and did sort of connect to it the way it was written, then we would be celebrating our sexuality. We will be celebrating our bodies and acknowledging it as what it is and not running away from it filled with shame and fear and discontent. So this, you know, part of the education is about letting people see what sex and sexuality really is about, peeling away all these layers of negativity that have been built on for so many years. And I am going to say primarily because of religion. So this is the root of the need to teach people what this really is, that pleasure is a wonderful ability to have, a gift to receive. And that if something feels good, you don't automatically assume it's going to get you in trouble, right? Those are the things that got attached to the concept of pleasure and eroticism over the years. Right? So it's really fighting, you know, a lot of education is trying to kind of redirect the tide in some ways.
So fascinating, everything you just said. I actually really appreciate and love that you went to the root, um, where you are saying that you feel like this kind of misperception came from. Because, when I talk to a lot of similar experts, everyone kind of says that our, you know, purity consciousness kind of came from religion. It's all about religion. But I really like that you went to the story that kind of, cast all these different perceptions on what it meant, what it didn't. And I don't have the verse in front of me. I almost want to pull it up, but I do remember having a thought when I've read that verse in the past where it said, they ate of the fruit and then they realized they were naked.
Right.
It's like they realized it and then they were ashamed and they became, but they were naked, right? So if they were created naked and they were that way, why now was it bad? It really was, like you said, it's like something in the perception change, not in who they were per se.
Right.
I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and I like the way you talked about it in a sense of, the pleasure was there, the nakedness was there, but then their perception changed and they became ashamed of it or whatever. But these are things that we can still hold on to and go back to and celebrate and enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what the whole intention was in the beginning. Right? We just took it to a different area. And again, the impact of all of that, it has been this giant snowball, down this, millennial hill kind of thing that, millennia, not millennials, that that's where kind of that started. But then when you look at what are the, especially religious based, but legal, right? Because the laws were based on this stuff. Today, still, when we look at what are still technically illegal sexual acts, right? Under that banner of sodomy. Right? Now, again, how many people think sodomy is only anal intercourse? And it's not. It's anything. And what is technically still illegal in the United States is any sexual act or position that does not potentially result in pregnancy. Right? Even if they do, if it's designed for a woman's pleasure, no, it's illegal because a woman on top is illegal. Right? Doggy style, illegal. Side by side, illegal. The only legally accepted, as well as religiously accepted, sexual act is a heterosexual man on top, penis in vagina from start to finish. That's it. Anything else is called sodomy.
Wow. So there are actual laws around this.
Yes, and I think it was 1985. It was pretty recently that even the Supreme Court finally ruled that these can't be primarily enforced by themselves. So, in other words, if somebody was, walking by your house and your window is open and they see you in your bedroom and, let's say you and a male partner and you're on top, they can call the police and have you arrested.
As
Now,
of 1985, they
well,
cannot, though.
well, as of 1985, they can only hold that against you if they get you committing another unlawful act, right? Then they can add it on. I get the best comparison would be seatbelt laws, right? They can no longer stop you just for not wearing your seatbelt, but if they stop you for something else and you're not wearing your seatbelt, now they can add that onto it.
Oh, wow.
Remember, once a law is on the books, it's always enforceable.
Fascinating. Fascinating. First of all, I did not know how in depth and detailed these laws were. I have heard, because they're not really enforced, obviously, but the fact that they were created does say something really potent about the control and, yeah, the paranoia and the misunderstandings around sexuality. And you said something interesting, which is that specifically positions or situations that are bringing on female pleasure are really banned.
Yep. Yep. And again, they're illegal. And I mean,
Illegal.
even
Okay.
people like Freud over the years, and even still people today, when we look in the context of things like genital mutilation, right? What really is behind that? We're still looking at, in modern society, a number of people still hold this old prehistoric, that was never true kind of view that women shouldn't want that kind of pleasure. What kind of woman are you if you want to feel that? A clitoris orgasm? What's wrong with you? I mean, this is in 2023 that people still think this, right? If this was 1523, it would still be wrong, but I can understand it a little bit better. Right?
At LiveJasmin, we're no strangers to female sexuality really being stigmatized, because obviously majority of models are women, and they face really harsh judgment and stigma, to the point where obviously, they have to hide some of them. They can't share what they do with their family because they'll be outed by the family and cut off. And I've always kind of wondered, why is it that when there's a woman in particular, I think in general, society is not comfortable with pleasure and for anyone. I mean,
Not at all.
however, it is clear that we're, especially as a society, uncomfortable with women's
Yeah.
pleasure and women really owning that pleasure. And
Yeah.
the women who do, and they're very clear about that, they face consequences for doing that. And
Yes.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on why specifically is women's sexuality so controlled and so, yeah, judged, if it's for any purpose other than birthing a baby?
Right. Now, again, unfortunately, this is also kind of a simple one. Fear. Female sexuality, female sexual energy, which is power, right? Men have always known throughout history, you are the life givers. You also have a power over us, especially heterosexual men, that we feel helpless, right? And there is a sense of that for a lot of guys, right? You know how many women during the witch hunt years, I mean, the literal witch hunt years, where how many women were killed, put to death, accused of being witches, their only crime was they were attractive, right? They were either life sect, they were orgasmic, they were either herbalists, midwives, because they should know about that stuff. Only those man doctors should know about that stuff. So if you know about these things, doesn't matter that you learned from your grandma and grandma before her and grandma and generation after generation. You must be in league with the devil if you know that kind of stuff. And women that were sexual. Some women didn't do anything, right? Maybe this woman was walking through the market one morning, buying vegetables to bring home. She's minding her own business. Some other guy is walking through the market with his wife. He keeps looking at her. His wife catches him looking at her. And his excuse is, oh, hey, don't blame me. It's not my fault. She must have put a spell on me and she's going to get killed. I mean, this is how it was back then. So, this, again, there's this history of this misogyny, and it's all, I think, focused on trying to control, dominate, or protect ourselves from this feminine power, right? So the one area, right, that you're the life givers, that you can multitask on things, that you can take, I'm not going to say women have a higher pain tolerance than men, but there are things that are part of being a woman that most men would have absolutely no ability to tolerate. So we do kind of know on some usually non-conscious, sometimes it's a very conscious level, that you're intimidating to us. Right? So there's always been that sort of male drive to use the one thing we do have over you for the most part, which is physical dominance, physical power. So we've been using that for all of these centuries to keep you in line so we don't feel threatened. And I really do think that that's the story of this sort of gender evolution and where we have come for in this such separate places. And again, I have to say, this was all started really with religion. Right? There was, again, back, if you go back, a couple of thousand years, because of the way social systems were set up, there was a division of labor. Right? There was a need for males to use their physical power more for hunting and lugging big things and doing that. And women were doing more of the things that were about gathering and then, the family stuff. But I mean, let's cut to where we are right now. Technology has certainly eliminated any physical differences between men and women in terms of ability.
With that being said, I've interviewed a lot of members that come to LiveJasmin on the platform, and they have developed these incredibly strong relationships with some of these models.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm talking like 15 years of chatting with the same model. And some of them have told me, I was feeling very alone, or I had just gotten out of a nasty divorce and feeling very depressed. One even mentioned like he felt suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment of just having someone be there with him and recognize him and give him whatever he was needing, it got him feeling better enough to where he could take other steps to feel better in his life instead of just staying in this, deficit of where he was. And so just to what you were talking about, it made me think that female sexuality, or maybe just sexuality in general, can also be extremely healing for people.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. But, I feel like I need to give you another analogy here. Do you know anybody with diabetes by any chance?
I don't.
Okay. Just curious, again, just how quick the reference would get there. But yeah, no, it's all good. Somebody who's diabetic, if they're having a crash, right, a sugar crash, that's a crisis. They're in crisis. Now, if somebody is crashing with their blood sugar, we are going to take whatever we can have, candy, honey, sweet. We're going to put sugar in their mouth, right? And usually the idea is get them out of that crisis, and now you'll give them something to eat that is, better for them and is going to really do the job. But you need to give them that, what might be something you normally don't eat.
Right.
So sex can be like that, right? It's life enhancing. It's validating. Pleasure makes the world look different, when we're in it. It's got so many affirming things that are associated with it. But when people are using sex, I'll just put it that way, as that kind of almost like a medicator, right? They're using sex kind of like a drug to make them feel better. Right? That can get people out of that crisis. That could be like putting, squirting honey into a diabetic's mouth. But we don't want that to become their diet. And I think that's sometimes what happens, that they get some needs met by these kind of online attachments. They have a sense of, well, you know what? I can connect to somebody. Look at that. Somebody is interested in interacting with me. Maybe the world's not so bleak. It can show them maybe there's a hint of a sunrise, coming around that. So it's not as bad as I think it is. But now the problem is, but this woman gets me. This one gets me like nobody else. She knows this is where I have to stay. And now it becomes a delusional, if not obsessive kind of connection. Right? So, and again, I find myself probably saying things like this more than I'm comfortable with, but we have to put some kind of guardrails around our behavior with some of this, because we can sometimes rely on it to a point where it becomes unhealthy. Right? We can ignore it, and that can become unhealthy. Right? So it's really finding that Goldilocks level, right? That just right relationship we have, where we can feel good, we can use this to recharge. It's okay if I want to feel better by using sex, but I don't want to start looking at this with a sense of dependency or reliance. I can't look at sex as a tool that's going to be making me feel better, because it won't. Right? That's just going to be set up for disappointments and frustrations and dashed expectation.
No, that's a fair point. Absolutely. And that's certainly an issue that some people do have or face, is using a service like LiveJasmin, or even, I mean, you can see this with people on social media, using it compulsively and in a way that's now taking away maybe some of its benefits. I want to ask you though, that's a great analogy of how some people do use sex as a way to just keep putting the honey in their mouth to feel a little bit better for the 2 minutes or whatever, you know what I mean? And then they go back to feeling very depressed or whatever their issue is. From your perspective, your experience, the research you've seen, what do you believe is the purpose of sex and our sexuality?
I don't think there is a purpose. I think it is inherently multifunctional or multi-dynamic. To be honest with you, the only real function, if I'm going to even use the word function to sex, is reproduction. The other things that come along with it are just wonderful aspects of it. They're wonderful experiences and things that we can learn and discover through. So the function, I think, is reproduction, but it's a vehicle for all that other stuff, for connection, for validation, for sense of grounding in my life, or all those other things that we look at. So I think we get sometimes, we get lost in some of these little rabbit holes when we start to, and I think it's kind of an oversimplification when we're looking at, well, what's it supposed to be for? Right? And what is it really meant for? And I think right from the very beginning, there's a reason why we as animals are not regulated by ovulation and reproductive cycles. We can be sexual anytime with anyone or anything we choose. We don't have to be attracted. We don't have to be ready. We don't have to be any of those things there doesn't have to be anything. We can do it how, when, where, for whatever reason we want. But that can also sort of open up, a lot of roads that, we can discover and maybe discover, oh, maybe I don't want to go down that road. But sometimes we get lost down some other road. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. It comes back to, again, your previous question about why is education important? Because it helps us navigate all of this stuff. That's really what a lot of sex ed is about, navigating behaviors, feelings, the way we think about this stuff, the way we connect to other people, how even can we discover something new, right? Experimentation, there actually has to be things that go along with that to make it safe and effective. So it's got to be conscious, right? We just got to have our eyes open. And that's what we don't do, right? We make sure we don't see anything with sex, right? Dark room, eyes shut tight. That's how most people do it.
Yes, absolutely. That's certainly the tone of society when it comes to sex and sexuality. But what is so interesting is that while we don't want to look at it, we do treat it as the redheaded stepchild that's there, but we just hope that it will go away, or not completely, but that we won't have to deal with it.
That's the key, yeah.
We are still very obsessed with it. So sex is also selling everything that we're buying. Sex is on every single form of entertainment that we're watching. So it's like, what are your thoughts on this interesting dynamic of push-pull, where we don't want to look at it or deal with it, but at the same time, we are obsessed with it. And it is actually everywhere. But yeah.
I mean, I think that is perfectly symptomatic of that ambivalence that we have.
Okay.
Right? I mean, this is again an old idea that has been around in this country, not any other country that I've ever been aware of. But something that girls were often told about their first sexual experience. Right now, again, you want to talk about ambivalence? Sweetheart, your first sexual experience, it's going to be so special. It's going to be wonderful. It's so special, but it's going to be really painful, and you should probably get drunk and get it over with. That's just not rational on any level. I actually got in trouble with my fifth grade teacher because I heard in fifth grade that old message: sex is bad and it's dirty, but you save it for the one you love. Most of us grew up with that kind of message. And I remember in fifth grade, that didn't make sense to me. I asked my teacher, shouldn't I have sex with people I don't like? Because that made more sense to me. If it's bad and dirty, why would I do that to somebody I love?
Wow.
I'm going to find people I don't like, and I'm going to give them bad and dirty. Right? And I got paddled in the principal's office for that. Because they just thought it was just another case of me being a wise ass. But it really kind of didn't make sense to me. Right? But this is the mixed message. This is how we talk and treat sex, right? With these two push me, pull yous. So I think we're the only country in the world that has that kind of ambivalence, right? On the one hand, we're obsessed with it, but that's only more in popular media, right? If you look in advertising, pop culture, media stuff, there is that obsessive sexual connection. But if you look at our institutional values, it's the opposite.
Yes.
Right? Don't do it. It's dangerous. Bad things will happen. So this is what we're stuck in, because what we're not getting is, ready for it? The education. It's not happening. We're not learning about it. So this is what is shaping us. And let me also add, the result of all of this, the lack of education, right? Parents and schools fighting each other over whose responsibility, and ultimately nobody is doing it. You know who the number one source of education about sex and sexuality is, not just for young people, but even for adults? Porn.
Porn, yeah.
Right. And I will directly ask these parents who are so opposed to sex ed, even though they have no idea what it is and what it involves, right? If this is really what they wanted, because this is their responsibility, this is their fault. Right? All of that nonsense, that we're the only country in the world, in the developed world, that goes through this. And now, as a result of this jockeying and ambivalence and push me, pull you mixed messaging, is that porn is educating our kids. We're not. Right? And one more thing to consider in all of this. There's a reason. In fact, this is the reason, because we don't teach it. We don't even want to address it and confront it directly. This is also the reason why we in the United States lead the world in every negative consequence associated with sex and sexuality. We lead the world in unintended pregnancies. We lead the world in STIs, including the per capita rate of HIV. We lead the world in sexual crime, sexual violence, sexual problems, sexual victimization. I mean, if something can go wrong with sex and sexuality, we're number one. And it's been shown, there's been studies done, especially in the 80s and 90s, that the main difference between why we don't see any of those kinds of negative outcomes in European countries and Nordic countries compared to the United States is because they look at sex and sexuality as a natural part of our humanity. It's biology, not morality. Right? It's cultural, not morality. And we insist on this arbitrary, and I will say kind of ridiculous, lens of morality that we look at sex through. And that's really hurting us.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I like how you said that it's biology, not morality. That's really, I think, a powerful statement. If I gave you a microphone that was going to broadcast into every home in America and you could share a message with them, and they would hear it, what would that message be? What do you wish that people understood or knew about sex and sexuality that they just are not getting now?
My first response is simple, two words: lighten up. One of them, I think, one of the most important, most general messages that we can get is that this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to feel good. We take sex way too seriously. We attach so much baggage to it and so much irrelevant and inappropriate meaning. We use it as an excuse for so many things that we just need to lighten up, stop taking it so seriously. Right? Is there a dark side to sex? Yes, there is. But the more we're able to lighten it up, the more we're bringing light into this darkness, and we can kind of get rid of that. So the abuse, the pain, the shame that so many people have, right? Yet this is supposed to be life-giving, life-affirming, pleasurable, mutual, help each other feel better. You know, we need to focus more on that. So I think we go out of our way to bury this negative stuff on it, to take it so seriously. Even a lot of therapists, when we talk about how you as a couple can improve your sex life, we talk about them doing a lot of work. And one of my favorite things that I've heard over the years is, you talk about sex, it's only work if you're getting paid for it. Right? This is supposed to be play. Right? Granted, sometimes if the purpose and the intention, they're trying to have a baby, trying to get pregnant, okay, that's a focus, that's an intent, but it should still be fun. Right? It's not shouldn't be so serious and what we're doing and oh, this is sex. No, sex it's meant to be playful and joyous and curious and oh, where does this go kind of thing. But that's when we're connected, when it's mutual, when it's consensual and it's comfortable. Right? And those are all the things that we're lacking so often when it comes to sex and sexuality. So that would be my mic drop, would just be a lighten up.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, very well said. And I think that that is a great model for a lot of other areas of life, actually.
Yeah,
Just
I do too.
lighten up. None of us are getting out of this alive. It's okay.
That's right.
Um, you mentioned a word earlier when I asked you about what sex is for from your perspective. And you said it could be connection, it could be all kinds of things. And connection is a really big word, and it's one of our favorite words here because that is ultimately what we have found drives at least our business on this site. So I don't know if you know, the Kinsey Institute has been doing studies on LiveJasmin,
Yes.
user
Yeah.
based. Yeah. And they have found that the models who are making the most money, and some of these girls have become millionaires from Jasmine alone, their calls actually have nothing to do with anything that's explicit.
Yeah.
And they're not taking off their clothes. They're talking with their members about what the dog ate for dinner and what's
Huh?
going on at work. And
Sure.
they've built these relationships. So it's connection. And I'm just curious from your perspective, what role does connection play in our sexuality?
I think it's absolutely crucial, and I think it plays a role in most people's sexual experiences and activities. Certainly, there are, the more selfish people. They're only interested in getting in and getting off, and they're gone. Right? But I don't think that's most people. I think what most people are looking for, and too many people, historically, too many women right? Just looking at, some of the more common dynamics, I have kind of learned that sex is a way to get that connection, right? Again, one of the old stereotype cliches, just, male, female perspective, that it was often said that men will use love to get sex, women will use sex to get love. Right? Now, again, don't want to oversimplify and stereotype, but if we just look at that as a basic kind of dynamic that is in place, we need to look at that really closely. And I think, I also think of how a lot of guys, when the only avenue for that kind of entertainment would be to go to like a strip club. And really, those dancers that made the most money were not any better at moving their body. They were not any better at dancing than any other dancer. What they were good at was making eye contact with these guys, establishing that connection, and letting these guys in the audience somehow believe they were special. Right? She's interested in me. Right? That's the connection these guys are looking for when they go in there. Now, is it delusional? Of course. Most guys know that that is delusional, but that's also what they're agreeing to do when they sign on. They agree that this is about the fantasy, and it's, if they do this to make themselves feel good. Now that this has kind of left the strip club and is now in people's homes, I think we're connecting to it a little bit differently. So now I think there's the delusional aspect has gotten a lot stronger, right? And I apologize, I can't say that I know it sounding very judgmental, but there's a reason why catfish is such a part of our vocabulary now, and it has nothing to do with hush puppies, right? It's so commonplace. People have been so willing to put themselves in that position. And I think what happens now, without that real, force that is driving this connection, now it becomes purely fantasy. So now I don't just look at this model as a model who I am spending my money with time. I'm not sure how they bill for that, but I know sometimes it's by the minute, sometimes you buy blocks of time, you buy the credits. There's all kinds of ways to spend money doing this. And I'm at my home, I'm in my desk or on my table or in my bed. I'm connected with this model. She's interacting with me, or he's interacting with me, or they're interacting with me. And you know what? They seem to be listening to what I'm saying, responding to what I'm saying. They seem to be sending me these positive kinds of things. And it doesn't take long for a lonely person, a disconnected person, a person who is just longing for more than they have, to project their needs onto that interaction, convince themselves this is meeting their needs. And now we have these situations that, not necessarily with LiveJasmin, they can see this model. They're interacting with them in real time. So, it does get fueled, right? And they can go on for years, basically engaged in this, what they think is a real connection. And you know what? I think the nature of a lot of the models and the people who do cam, because they're also connecting with these people, there is really a connection there. They're not falling in love with them. They're not doing anything more than what it is. They're very clear about it, but they know, this is one of my peeps. This is one of my people. So there is that two-way acknowledgement. Right? Unlike, again, like with catfish, where these people have a relationship. I'm in love. This is the most important person in the world to me. They get me like nobody else does. Nobody talks to me the way they do. Right? And for the last 4 years, I've been basically building my life around my online chats with this person. But then, yes, have you ever seen them? Like, you ever video chatted? No. You ever talk on the phone? No. Right? And I actually asked somebody years ago about that. And even I got to that point and said, well, how do you know who you're even talking to? How do you know they're anything like what they're telling you? And I got an indignant response. that was along the lines of, well, they sent me a picture. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that it's impossible to send somebody a picture of somebody that isn't them. Right. So I think there's different levels, right? And I don't think this is about the models, and I don't think this is about the camming or the streaming. I think this is about what drives these people, mostly men, to want to sort of make this their relationship, right? And I think what these models are doing are, they are, I think, willing to make that connection. Well, not all of them. Some are just there, just shut up and just pay me, right? Just be quiet and watch. There's an element of that out there, I'm sure. But I think a lot of these sort of long-term connections are giving this person what it is they're looking for, what it is that they went on this site to begin with. It's almost like what we see in the kink world and in more kink relationships compared to, I'll just say, vanilla, right? Which, I mean, virtually all, other relationships. Most people go into these connections or make these connections and establish these relationships with expectation and assumption, never clear communication, right? Your models, and just like people in the kink community, because these relationships have to be clear, the communication has to be there. These are communicated. These are negotiated. These are agreed upon. So everybody kind of shares the expectation a little bit more than I think what people do in, I'm just going to say, the real world, right? Where they just start these relationships, like I say, with assumptions and expectations, and then have the nerve to be surprised when we're not on the same page.
Yeah, I think we can all take a page out of the kink community's book as far as communication,
Yes,
No,
absolutely.
it is true. I think when things are over communicated or very thoroughly communicated in any relationship, whether it be personal or business or whatever the case is, you feel more comfortable in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
There is less chance for disappointment because you've been so clear on your position, and less disappointment leads to less resentment, which we know is the killer, I think, of relationships. But
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that is, where LiveJasmin models, I think, are doing it better than a lot of these other platforms.
yes, I have to agree with you there. Absolutely. They're very clear on the role. And I think the platform itself also kind of encourages this type of clarity on the roles of everyone. But this platform in particular, I've been told many times, is so much more like relationship based. There's so much more talking. It's not just the explicit side of things, where I think, yeah, the dynamic, it does change the dynamic when it's more relationship and connection focused.
Yeah, and I mean, and even though it's still, the model is the worker and the viewer is the client, but it's not an exploitive relationship. That's what seems to be very, very different as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. I actually have really thoroughly enjoyed this interview. You stated things and brought up points that were very different or more in depth than other people, starting with going back to literally the beginning of our call and the Bible, Genesis. I think that was really interesting. And, yeah, facts like that, whether people will be receptive or agree to it or not, even just hearing it and having that perspective planted it's interesting,
Oh, good, good. I'm glad. Thank you. And I have to say, you are a delightful person to speak to, and you're a wonderful interviewer, and I thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.